What's up, everybody? It is Friday, and you are about to be treated to a real treat. 2 hours of GoJo and Golic. We're going to talk about everything that's going down. Last night, okay, Broncos-Chargers, there was a fair catch kick. Pretty cool, and it calls back to some history with the Chargers. We will talk about that. Plus, we got Saturday games in the NFL tomorrow, and obviously the college football playoffs begin. So we will discuss all of that and more coming your way on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here. We got a banger in the hopper for you today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Going to be a fun one today as we get ready for a big-time college football weekend here. Joey Kaufman going to join us to preview the Ohio State game. He covers them for the Columbus Dispatch. And in the second hour, Dan Lanning, the head coach of the Oregon Ducks, the #1 seed in the whole dance, as we get ready to start the opening round of the college football playoffs. And if you're watching on YouTube, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, any of the fun places you can watch the DraftKings Network, you may recognize this as my father's South Bend studio, as we've made a little detour in our travels to get out here for the first ever college football playoff home game. And that's the unique distinction Notre Dame and Indiana have, Dad, coming up as the Friday night standalone game, is they're going to be the first of these home playoff games, so we had to come here and see it.
Yeah, history starts in college football, starts tonight at Notre Dame,
Yep.
which, you know, for those that hate Notre Dame will just shake their head and say, oh, you guys are trying to take credit for the history. Yeah, we are.
Yes.
Yeah, we are.
We actually do history very well around here, and we'll go keep on doing it.
We do.
No surprise.
First game, cars lined up already, snow. I mean,
Yeah.
you were out before the show started and took a picture of the long line of cars.
Yeah, it was, and we've been back for, I haven't been back for a ton of games, but I remember what Fridays used to be like for us, and Saturdays really, because this is, actually a game day today, albeit on Friday. So people have a normal work week, but we got in town for this. And yeah, I went over this morning to go to the Starbucks near campus to get us some coffee before the show. And I'm parking over there and I'm looking and seeing a bunch of lights on the road. And I'm like, all right, it is 7 in the morning. It's just dark out, it's daylight savings. And I see most of them are parked there waiting to go around. And I look down where the ice hockey arena is, where the other entrance to the tailgate lot is. And there's cars parked there on the side of the road with their lights on, waiting to get in by the stadium. And I realize these are people getting ready to go tailgate as a light snow is falling right now. It's supposed to taper off around noon today here in South Bend and really not be too much of a factor. It is, decent cold the same way it would be in a normal December Indiana day. And so it was the first moment where it had finally settled in. We got in late last night where I'm like, oh, wow, it's about to really happen today.
Yeah, we got in late last night and the airport was packed. I mean, the excitement, and this will be the excitement at all 4 campuses.
Yes.
Right, tonight and the 3 games tomorrow. Personally, I love the SMU Penn State slot of playing at noon as a former player.
Yes.
Let me get up, let me play. I know that maybe the tailgaters won't get as much tailgating in. They'll be up probably at 5, 6 in the morning doing their breakfast tailgate.
They'll find a way.
Yeah,
Having made a trip to Happy Valley before, something tells me they're going to find a way to make sure they get their good time in, as will everybody. But it even seems like a step up in the normal intensity. And as the day goes along around here, I'll be curious because you do have the added element of it being on a Friday. We know there was a lot made yesterday, as Adam Schefter tweeted out the list of games coming up on Saturday, including NFL games here. This is a weekend where these two sports actually go head to head, even though I think the core of their bases are different enough to where you'll have a lot of people still working more with whatever side they came in on.
Oh, yeah. There's 2 NFL games, one in the afternoon, early afternoon, one in late afternoon. We'll get into how they mesh with the college games. But yeah, there's enough core fans for all the teams where the ratings are. I mean, listen, these are the 2 most popular sports in the country.
Yes.
The pro and the college. I mean,
football and junior football.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. It's the most popular there is.
You're violence addicts.
There's just going to be an extra air of excitement on these campuses, and for these 8 teams that are playing for, again, history of the playoffs, and winner moves on, loser goes home. It's truly one and done.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because FCS, Division I AA football, whatever you've called it over the years, has always had an actual playoff.
Nothing new to them.
So they've been used to all this. But like I go back to the feeling of, we played in the BCS title in 2012, and back then there were only 2 teams that got to the dance, and so you had that feeling at the end of the year of, oh, everybody's watching us. Like that was the eerie feeling before that game. Not necessarily ominous, but it just almost felt quiet around you because you realize there were no other games to talk about. It's you.
Yep.
And so you can't turn on the TV without seeing you being talked about in some way as the team. These guys have all had the 4-team playoff. Notre Dame was involved in the 4-team playoff at a couple of different junctures. And so they're used to the attention being different around these games. And the ramp up, though, you hear a coach like Marcus Freeman talk about a lot of these teams, Notre Dame included, have been in playoff mode since they lost that game against Northern Illinois, since early season losses for some of these teams, for Clemson and SMU going into the final game in the ACC title and playing for their lives. And so it's going to be an interesting balance for these staffs of understanding this is different, but trying to make it feel the same as everything else.
And now adding to it with the 4-team playoff, you obviously had a semis and then the finals, but they were held at bowl games.
Yes.
These are home games. This is a whole new bird here. And for those already, if there are blowouts in these 4 games that are going to say, woe is me, why did we expand the playoffs? Just go look at the results of the 4-team playoff. Since it's been around. The semis, when there was only 1 game before the finals, there were blowouts. Notre Dame was involved in a couple of those, but so were the other teams in the semis. There were blowouts. There may be blowouts, there may not. I hope it's all great games, but if there's a blowout in one of these 4 games or a couple of these 4 games, that means absolutely nothing.
Yes, I also heard Stephen Godfrey on Split Zone Duo talking about the fact that the old school, the old guard bowl teams bowl groups, the bowl games themselves would likely be looking to swoop in if you hear stories about, hey, things didn't work well on this campus, or logistically it was an issue, or, oh, we ran into these problems for opposing fans trying to come into town, that the traditional bulls would come in and say, we don't need to do this on campus. That's a bunch of bull stuff here. We need to do these on the campus. As corporatized that the sport's becoming, and as much as this is all pointed to the TV product, the fans deserve something. And these home games and home sites for the first round of the playoff, at the very least, the system could do.
Yeah, now one of the first things we'll be able to watch before the game even starts is how many fans of the opposing team got tickets.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, that'll be the other big subplot of the entire weekend, no doubt.
Yeah, it really will, because there was already the hubba blue for Ohio State and Tennessee.
Yeah.
Of the set. What the hell
are
is
you
that?
1,000 years?
What is that?
You know,
sit on my porch. Get off my lawn.
I mean, that's even older than get off my lawn.
Yeah,
You need like a
was,
wizard's hat and a staff if you're going to talk like that. So, hey, I'm going to save you from yourself on that one and just say, we're super excited for this. We're going to the game tonight. We're obviously going to be at Penn State SMU tomorrow, doing some pregame work there for Bleacher Report, which we're very excited about. So it's a big, full football weekend. And Dad, it got started last night with a banger on Thursday Night Football. Sweet Uncle Al Michaels. I don't know the man at all. I don't know why I call him Uncle Al. I don't know why this bit started on this show, but that man's happiness on Thursday Night Football means an awful lot to me here. And can I just say something before we get into the breakdown of the actual game here? Because they've had, you know this, going through the broadcast of a game, you've got certain promos that you've got to do for things coming up on the airways of the network that you are broadcasting on. And so Amazon has some sort of documentary coming out with Mr. Beast, the very famous YouTuber. I could not believe the joy in Al Michaels' voice, and Kirk Herbstreit commented on it, that Al Michaels had when he was talking about the Mr. Beast reading documentary, about what an amazing documentary it is and what a cool guy he is. And just the fact that Al Michaels was, one, aware of who Mr. Beast is, and then two, that jacked up for it, because we know Thursday nights haven't exactly brought out the most excited Al Michaels. I was amazed, and I was so happy that it made him happy, and I don't know why that happens to me.
I don't know why he picked that one, because that's certainly what happens on a broadcast when the play-by-play does a read. If it's interesting enough, both play-by-play and analysts will comment on it, and have something to say about it. I was a little stunned that he had something to say about that as well.
Yes, no, it was very interesting there. So happy Al Michaels was happy, and he got a great game here, Dad, that also featured history. So the Chargers come back and win this game 34-27. The Broncos could have clinched a playoff spot. Now, both of these teams still great odds to make the postseason right now. And now even the Bengals have a little glimmer of hope based off this. So there are some playoff ramifications from this. But over the course of this game, Dad, where you could argue it's a couple of different spots, there was some questionable game management by Sean Payton, both the decision not to go for it on fourth down near the end of the game here when the Chargers were ultimately able to salt this thing away coming off their last attempt. But then before the end of the first half here, Sean Payton and the Broncos get the ball back with about 30 seconds and 2 timeouts. And they go out there and are immediately playing the short game, where you think, all right, they just want to run it out and get to halftime here. They don't want to let Bo Nix try and put the ball in harm's way downfield, which I was already going, all right, if you had a quarterback you really trusted, would you let him maybe cut it loose here and go? You got 2 timeouts and a decent amount of the field. But all right, no harm, no foul if you want to just take it into the second half. They end up throwing an incompletion on second or third down. I forget what it was that stops the clock. And so now after the third down attempt that fails, Jim Harbaugh is able to bang a timeout with 8 seconds left and force them to punt. See what happens. The show goes on. They go back and the Chargers call for a fair catch.
Right, which is important.
Which is important. So they signal for a fair catch, and then he ends up getting interfered with. And so now not only does the penalty move it up, but we get to tap into a very rarely used rule, the free fair catch kick, where at any time, if you fair catch a ball, you're allowed to attempt a kick, a scrimmage kick from that point here, where the defense cannot block it. They've got to be lined up 10 yards away. Think basically structurally like a kickoff.
Like a kickoff, and there has to be a person holding the ball.
Yes.
Like the ball blew off the tee a couple of times, and someone has to come in and hold it. Someone has to come in and hold the ball.
It's like a pregame field goal attempt for these guys. It's like how they do in practice in the field goal attempt. And so you combine that rule, which doesn't really get used because usually you're fielding the ball in an area that'd be way too far for that. There's plenty of game time left, but at the end of halves and games, this becomes something of interest to these teams. And so you get the untimed down coming off the penalty
because it was a fair catch.
Because it was a fair catch and a penalty. You get the untimed down. The half can't end on that. And so they get 3 points there. That ends up being a big difference in the balance of this game because they tap into a rule that had not been used. So, Dad, there hadn't been a made fair catch kick since what, 1976? Do I have that right?
I think so. I think it was 76. Yes. I do believe.
Yes, December 21st, 1976. And it was a Chargers game. The Chargers were also the last team to successfully execute a free kick when Ray Wersching converted from 45 yards for the San Diego Chargers, November 21st of 1976 against Buffalo. Now, it's been attempted a number of times since then, but not made successfully. So we saw something we hadn't seen in 50 years last night.
And kudos. Now, I don't know who thought of it. The special teams coach is Ryan Ficken.
Yeah.
So who had that in their hip pocket that now.
Well, because you saw they took a timeout when they first sent the offense back out there because everyone was like, wait, and they heard, was it Terry McCauley who's the rules analyst for Thursday Night Football on Prime?
I think so.
Whoever the rules analyst was had it nailed and said, hey, this can be a free kick opportunity.
Because in a normal situation where the ball was, you'd have had one chance for a Hail Mary because you were close to the 50-yard line, and that's kind of what Jim Harbaugh was looking for. But when you can pull out that rarely used rule and say, wait a minute, you're adding 50, a penalty yardage to this, that puts us in field goal range, and the kicker is unbothered by any rush. That worked out perfectly. And I would imagine it had a number of fans and people watching kind of scratching their head.
Well, it was one of those moments, too, where I realized, like, for normal fans at home watching, like, they're probably like, oh, this is weird and stupid. Why does it exist? It only exists, fun fact, in the NFL and high school football. College football actually did away with the fair catch for a year in the 1950s, brought it back, and then did away with this rule then. It's an old rugby rule, but even most rugby leagues do not acknowledge this now. It's the NFL high school football and Australian rules football that allow this fair catch free kick as a part of their game. It feels like it shouldn't exist, or it should count for more points. It's an insane loophole in the rules.
It is a loophole. And by the way, if you're close enough to, you can drop kick it.
Yes,
if you're like, which we've seen a drop kick extra point.
And, it's one of those things too where I understand the average fan might not care. I was smiling so wide when this happened, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just because we do this and we see so many of the same things covering the sport that when you get something this different, it's certainly exciting. So, cool moment to be a part of in the midst of a game, Dad. That it started off in the first half. It looked like the Broncos were going to run away with this. They scored touchdowns on their first 3 drives. It's 21-10. And the Broncos' offensive line. We talked about the defense yesterday. Everyone wants to talk about Bo Nix. The Broncos' offensive line was giving him time, was paving the way for some great holes. That unit looked really strong in the first half and looked like the reason they were going to run away and high with this game. And then Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey really started to make things happen in the second half.
Yeah, Ladd McConkey ended up leading with 6 catches for 84 yards, but it was 21. They made it 13 at the end of the half. They outscored Denver 21-6 in the second half, put Denver in a position where they kicked a field goal and then had to onside kick it. And that doesn't work well in the NFL. So what does it do? It flip-flops the Chargers and Denver in the playoff spot right now. Baltimore is sitting in the 5 slot. The Chargers are in the 6 slot. Denver's in the 7 slot with the same record, 9-6. And the Chargers swept Denver. So all the Chargers need to do is stay even with Denver, and they'll be ahead of Denver because they swept them twice. And Denver's in the last slot at 9-6, and then there's Indy and Cincy at 6-8. So there's kind of a 2-game cushion for the last couple spots of the wild card.
There is. Dad, what was the difference in this game in your mind for these two teams? Because I look at it, and I know Broncos fans get sick and tired of this, but man, quarterback really does go a long way in this one with some of the throws that Justin Herbert was able to make. We know if the Broncos are going to win, Bo Nix, as a guy who's a viable run threat in this offense, is a huge part of it. He makes some great extracurricular plays, but for the most part, the best plays in their offense involve a lot of run after the catch here. They keep it low and slow. They have made him comfortable in that environment here. And on the other side, you had Justin Herbert on a bum ankle making some really impressive plays in the second half. And this Chargers team with a run game with a banged up backfield. You saw Haskins getting some time in there as well in that backfield. So Hassan Haskins getting a little work in there as well. So it was a committee effort there, but I really thought the quarterback difference shined through. And Sean Payton not taking his own advice on the call sheet. They saw it said, run it at the top of the call sheet. Everyone was talking about it. They ended up with 21 rushing attempts in a game where they had the lead that sizable going into the half. Was a bit surprising to me. Yeah, and for the Chargers, they almost split it perfectly. They had 28 rushing attempts and 31 passes. So they kept their game plan going, even though they were down a running back in J.K. Dobbins. They had Gus Edwards and got banged up a little bit in this game for a while and had to go out some. So they were digging deep in the running back room once J.K. Dobbins went out, but they kept it split pretty well. They did. I go overall to these teams. For the Chargers, we know health on defense has been a priority for them. Right. Joey Bosa was back in this game, showed up, had a sack, and started to look a little more like himself. They've had guys banged up and out on the back end there, and so it's a little different there. The Broncos defense also, Riley Moss was out again in this game. You saw Abrams Drain had the interception at the end of the first half that I thought was going to shut the door, Dad. Justin Herbert has been great at so many things, but most specifically this year we talked about, he had 3 turnovers coming into this game here. And so when he threw an interception, you felt like it was the horses of the apocalypse at the door and that the Chargers wouldn't be able to overcome that. So a monster win for them as Jim Harbaugh continues to lay the foundation for this team that as long as you've got Ladd McConkey and the quarterback healthy, it seems like they can accomplish a lot.
It's amazing how much is on Ladd McConkey's shoulders.
Yeah.
Right? Because they just kind of spread the ball out. Now, he didn't have a touchdown catch last night of Justin Herbert's too, but he still led the way. He kind of opens it up for everybody else. And
he's the one receiver that can get a win for them. Like when you need a guy to get open, do that. And that was Ladd in college. He is a professional at getting open. May not be the fastest, may not be the biggest or strongest, but he can get open for you. And every offense needs that, the party starter.
And we knew that about him coming in, but more got thrown on his shoulders because of the moves the Chargers made right in the offseason by basically getting rid of all of their offensive firepower. Has been Ladd McConkey, and it was the dual-headed running attack of Dobbins and Gus Edwards, of which they lost one of them. But that's again why I thought they would take a step back, and here they are, just about a lock for the playoffs.
Yeah, but again, both of these teams a very good chance to make the playoffs here. But the Chargers able to pull ahead slightly. You mentioned the season sweep changes a lot of the math for them as we head to the home stretch. Coming up next, we'll head to the Acrostic preview of the NFL weekend here on GoJo and Golic and get you a look at all the other big games and some division chances for people to hoist the crown next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here, and it is time for our acrostic, which means it must be Friday. So let's get it going. G, I'm not Emerson, so I begin with a G. G is for give me the division. The title usually depends. O is for oh, let's do it. The rivalry meets again. L is for let's move. Pay attention to the ankle that's on the mend. I is for all that matters. Gino and Seattle don't pretend. C is for can we go streaking? Baker has a win streak to defend. Okay, it's almost that time. Golics, let's bring them in. Here we go. Okay, guys. Let's go.
Respect. Although I can't hear the O without hearing it in the Ola do it cadence. It's just part of the fabric of my DNA at this point from years of being in stadiums. But the rest of that, as we have known for a long time, Jesse, far better at reading and poetry and wearing that hat than Emerson.
Yeah, without a doubt. Emerson balked at wearing the hat and then screwed up the spelling of our last name.
He was very whiny about it.
And not accepting of the responsibility of it as well.
So thank you for shouldering the load, Jesse.
You're welcome.
Jesse.
You're welcome.
Thank you for caring.
Yeah,
yes.
I always care. I always care about you guys. So guys, let's go with G. Give me the division. The Eagles can secure the NFC East division crown against the Commanders. They're favored by 3.5. What are we expecting here?
Yeah, Dad, I mean, they can secure the division crown. They can secure, at worst, the 2 seed in the NFC, as them, the Lions, and the Vikings, all 12-2 right now going into week 16. And so between that and, Dad, the Saquon Barkley pursuit of the rushing record, that I do wonder if we get back to that more even game split last week. It's not to say that in the NFL you can go out there and just try and prove a point, but we know the Eagles last week against the Steelers team that was A, better at stopping the rush, and B, just happened to be the opponent up next after all of the wailing and gnashing of teeth about the Eagles passing attack and the wide receivers not getting enough love. We know Saquon Barkley kind of took a back seat as A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith both went over 100 yards. I have a feeling that evens back out against this Washington defense that Saquon had a lot of success against the last time that they played. I believe 146 yards and 2 touchdowns versus Washington back in November when they played. So I would imagine we get back to more of the balanced Eagles attack on offense that's made them great.
Yeah, they play Washington, then they play the Cowboys, and then the Giants. And Saquon needs to average 139 yards a game.
Yeah, 418 yards he needs to pass ED
to break Eric Dickerson's record of 2,105 yards. So I agree with you. I think they get back to the run more, and they're not thinking about clinching a division title. That's just kind of along the way. That's like a pass rusher is going to tackle the running back on the way to the quarterback, right? That's a secondary thought to them because they have the division. It's about seeding right now, and right now they have the same record as Detroit, Minnesota, but Detroit has the 1 seed because of the conference record. They're 8-1 in the conference. Minnesota and Philly are 7-2.
Well, and a guy like Saquon Barkley's never gotten to really do this at this level. He's never gotten to be a part of a team like this. And so having that kind of new blood all around this team where a lot of the roster in the important positions have turned over and need this experience of, hey, this is a big regular season game for the guys like Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, some of the young guys there that have stepped up into big roles. I do think that's going to be important. And Dad, I do think this is a game that they go out here and win because of that. I pick them, and I would certainly give the points here, even on the road, against a Commanders team that, listen, it battled back, didn't look good again last week. I think towards the back half of the season, it's not maybe been as exciting as the first half of the season where they really jumped out and surprised a lot of people, especially with the play that Jaden Daniels had on offense.
Yeah, and listen, they're playing for the playoffs as well, right? I mean, they're sitting at 9-5, so they're in the playoff hunt right now, or in the playoffs right now as we speak, I believe. So they're trying to hold their position. They're trying to peak at the right time with a rookie quarterback, and they know they have to keep winning. While the Eagles are already in and playing for that seed, Washington is certainly playing A to stay in and B for a decent seed.
They are, and it's been a great story this season and is still a possibility, but this Eagles team has their sights set on the Lombardi and a very realistic chance for it. So I like the Eagles in this one. I think we get back to that. I think Saquon Barkley gets back onto that track, and we're talking about 100-plus yard game for him on the ground where he is the dominant force again for this team. Oh, by the way, listen, A.J. Brown and Terry McLaurin, the only 2 players with 5 or more games of 100 yards receiving this season. So for all the conversation about A.J. Brown not getting the ball enough, it's very similar.
That's why it was so surprising. It was like a funeral in the locker room after their 9th straight win, let alone their 10th straight win. So we don't need to rehash.
And trying to go on for 11. Yeah. Speaking of going on, Jesse, what do we got next year in the acrostic?
We got, let's do it. The Steelers-Ravens rivalry is here once again. Okay, guys, Ravens favored by 6.5. Who has the edge in this one? What do we think?
Yeah, Dad, I think it's got to go to Baltimore. I know history doesn't say that, right? When you look at these teams, the Steelers have won 8 of the last 9 games against Baltimore. Lamar Jackson is 1-4 against the Steelers in his career. But I look at this game big picture and say, all right, you're getting TJ Watt back, thankfully, after that ankle injury, but he is walking into this one a little bit damaged. And on the other side, it's kind of like we talked about last week. Third straight game, you're going to miss George Pickens. And I just really don't know if this offense can go blow for blow. Last game was a field goal fest, and that was where part of the worries about Justin Tucker really manifest themselves. A couple of big misses in that game where Chris Broswell on the other side made 6 field goals to help them win that one. I think you're going to have to score some touchdowns in this game. And unfortunately, that Steelers passing attack that took a step forward when Russell Wilson got into the lineup, I think really struggles without George Pickens there to take the top off.
Yeah, well, Pittsburgh has definitely been scoring more points than I thought they were going to score this year. It's tough to put them up there with the point scoring ability, especially a Buffalo team, right? And we know Kansas City can put points on the board when they need to. Yeah, getting TJ Watt back is obviously huge, even though we'll see how close to 100%. Nobody's 100% at this point, but how close he is. Losing George Pickens certainly hurts. And this was a game, was a 2-point game. It was a failed 2-point conversion by Baltimore to tie up the game. It was an 18-16 Steelers win. I'm surprised the number is 6.5. I know it's a home game for Baltimore. Pittsburgh, all they just do is keep surprising us this year, right? Do we think they were going to be this good? Do we think Russell Wilson in this offense at points during the season were going to score as many points as they scored? I know I didn't. I thought they were all going to be low scoring, grind them out games, but they have put up some points.
They have surprised us. This would be to win the division. There'd be no sneaking into the playoff as a wild card here. I don't think it happens this week. I like the Ravens in this game. I think they get the win.
I like the Ravens, but I'm not giving the 6.5.
All right, fair point. Jesse, let's move on. What do we got next?
All right, we got L. Let me see you move, Mr. Mahomes. Okay, he says the ankle's good. He's off the injury report. But how concerned are we about that ankle?
Well, I'm concerned about how much he's going to have to move. Now, that's part of his game, and certainly if he's out there playing, that means he's all right. Again, nobody's 100%. You're talking about a Houston team who's second only to Denver in sacks with 45. And again, I just say the sack number to amplify pressures. Pressures are usually 3 times the amount of sacks.
Yeah, they're second in pressure percentage behind the Cleveland Browns.
So you're gonna get Pat moving maybe more than he wants to. There was a thought, do you let him sit this game because then they play on Wednesday against Pittsburgh on Christmas Day. But hey, if he's fine to go, then go. But I do like Carson Wentz as the backup, though. Obviously, KC's playing for seeding as well. But that's the one issue I have is this Houston. Now, I like KC in the game, but this Houston defense can make Mahomes move more than he wants to.
So do you think they win?
I think the Chiefs win. Yes, They just. I mean, my God.
I saw Nick Wright go on a rant on Kevin Clark's podcast the other day. This is football, and it was a great rant talking about how this Chiefs team is so disrespected based off being back-to-back defending champs and always finding a way to win. Listen, we're judging the teams against the Chiefs against their own otherworldly standard. Kevin made the point, and I agree. This is the Patriots all over again, where even when they don't look good relative to the past versions of themselves, like we all have the best version of the Chiefs in our mind, and we know this team is not that. It's kind of like the Clemson conversation in college. Like, hey, you're still very good, but we know you're not as great as you used to be, and so we don't know what to do with that. You don't win in as exciting ways. It's not as fun to talk about because the feeling of inevitability and doubt in our minds every time we go to pick against them. Like, I picked against them last week. I'm not going to do it this week. They're going to find a way here. Honestly, I think the more interesting matchup in this game, by the way, is CJ Stroud versus this Chiefs defense. What he's going to do here. He's on the verge. He needs 252 yards to go over 3,500 yards. He would be the 9th quarterback in NFL history to throw for 3,500 yards or more in his first 2 seasons as a starter. So even after he's dealt with all those receivers being out and all the issues with that, still battled back to have a really productive season, has Nico back down the stretch. And so that'll be the matchup I'm curious of watching, but the Chiefs find a way to win because they always do.
Yeah, I think so as well, even though I liked, Houston, the running game, obviously with Mixon, again, the defense I talked about, but how do you bet against when they're not playing Buffalo in the regular season? How do you bet against Kansas City?
That really seems to be the one thing here. Buffalo there, and then maybe Cincinnati in the playoffs, but we won't get that opportunity. It looks like this season. Jesse, let's get the opportunity to go on next. What do we got?
Yeah, it all matters for the Seahawks. Okay, they need a win against a tight NFC West divisional race here. So, do we feel like they're going to come out desperate? What do you think?
They certainly will be here, Dad, but desperate's only going to, I think, take you as far as Geno Smith and how he's feeling now. Looks like he's going to play in this game. There's some optimism there. But you saw when Sam Howell went in there, for all of the warts on Geno's game with the turnovers this season, he is still far and away the best option for you at quarterback, and the only reason that you can stay afloat in a season where your offensive line's been a work in progress.
And Gino was when he was in the game, it wasn't going that well with Green Bay, right? So
no, but it wasn't going as bad as it went without him.
No, it wasn't. And you have Minnesota not only playing for the division with Detroit, but playing for obviously a high seed as well. As I said, it's Detroit, Philly, and Minnesota all vying for that top seed. And we had the Minnesota and Detroit game to end the season to probably decide it. So there's obviously a lot in the Seahawks. The Seahawks got swept by the Rams, so the Rams hold that edge over Seattle, and they play the end of the season as well. So a lot of meaning for both. I just think Minnesota is playing too well right now. I like Minnesota on the road.
I would agree. I think going to be a big game for Aaron Jones. I'm sure they're salivating after watching what Josh Jacobs did last week in the first half of that game to the Seattle defense, where that's always been the concern. Leonard Williams has been phenomenal in the interior of that defense. Boye Mafe and these guys on the edge can certainly get after it and maybe challenge the exterior of this Vikings line that, remember, Cam Robinson already in there because you had the injury to Christian Darrisaw, and they almost lost Brian O'Neill last week, too, to an injury that thankfully he came back to.
That
so
one kind of looked
scary looking like leg whip situation for him. So
and we'll see. Again, Minnesota, Brian Flores, they like to blitz. They have a high blitz rate, but Geno Smith, luckily in the game, does well against the blitz.
Yeah, and that's JSN territory, although I worry about his ability to respond and maneuver around that if he is not 100% going into this game. But like you said, I think between the blitz there and just how complete this Vikings team been. I know y'all Vikings fans hate me on Instagram right now because I said you guys aren't the Detroit Lions and the Eagles, but you're a great team in the NFC, and I think you're going to win this game and keep pace for all your hopes and dreams. I love you. Kisses. Jesse, let's get on to the last one here. What do we got?
Lastly, C, and it's not for the Cowboys, okay? It's for can the Bucs keep their win streak going as they look to lock up the NFC South for good? What do we think?
All right, Dad, you got this game this weekend, so what do you think?
I mean, listen, the Bucs defense is basically top 10, top 5 in almost every category. Tampa Bay. Yeah. Obviously, there's a Mike Evans watch of catches he needs and yardage he needs to get to his 11th straight season.
Which I think this team cares a lot about.
Oh, I do too. He's going for 60 catches and 1,000 yards for 11 straight, first 11 seasons in the league, which is absolutely incredible. But Baker Mayfield has been playing very well. But for the Cowboys, since Micah Parsons has come back in Week 10, they have the 5th best pressure rate, and they have the most sacks. Since Micah came back in Week 10, they have 24 sacks. That leads the NFL. They have 42 sacks on the year. What a difference the defense is with one guy, how you have to game plan for. Enrico Dowdle, the running back, since Week 9, since he has started getting the majority of the carries, he's near the top in yards after the catch, near the top in making missed tackles. He's had 3 100-yard games in a row, all career best each time. So they kind of have it go. They're like that playoff team looking to play them in the regular season going, uh-oh, you know, with the way Dallas is playing.
The quarterback competition saying has to be calling to Jerry Jones like the Green Goblin mask right now, because you know he lives for that stuff. He tried to do it with Cooper Rush last time. Dak Prescott has to be going insane thinking, oh, now, of course, we figured this all out, that I'm out here. Dad, I'm with you, though. I think the Cowboys have been a great story, and it's why Mike McCarthy's job is going to get saved. He has had this team still ready to go. And a guy like Micah Parsons, one of your best players, going out there and landing on the line in a lost season that way for that coach and for his teammates, even though he made it clear it's more for the teammates than the coach, I think goes a long way. I think Tampa Bay wins this game. I know you can't pick it. I think the way the Bucs have been playing, too explosive, though, especially with the Mike Evans factor and all that, for a team like Dallas to keep up here. But Cowboys, listen to me closely. Micah Parsons came out and says he'd like to have his deal done this offseason by March so he can help this team get ready and allocate resources elsewhere in free agency. Listen to him.
Get it done.
Don't make this hard like you've done the rest of them, Jerry. Sweet Christ, it doesn't have to be this difficult. Dad just told you why. Go ahead and get it done. We're going to look ahead at the college football playoff next so I can stop sweating on GoJo and Golic. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Now that we've got the NFL weekend that is going to be intertwined with the CFP previewed for you guys, start to look ahead to the college football playoff. We are out here in South Bend, Indiana, getting ready for Notre Dame and IU to kick it off tonight. For more on one or the other, and probably the biggest matchup of the weekend, the one most people are curious about, Tennessee going on the road to Columbus at Ohio State. For more on that, Joey Kaufman joins us from the Columbus Dispatch, cover on the Ohio State Buckeyes, for them to take a look at this. So, Joey, walk me through it. What's the feeling and buzz like around Columbus right now as you guys get ready for the game?
A lot of angst among Buckeye fans just because of the way the regular season ended with a 4 straight loss to Michigan, and a Michigan team that was certainly not of the caliber of past years. So it's been an interesting 3 weeks, a lot of existential questions about the direction of the program. So this is not a fan base going into the playoff expecting a whole lot. It's a lot of mixed feelings. I think the team and players and staff are eager to sort of wash the feeling of the last game off. But it's an interesting, I think, dichotomy between the fan base and the people within the facility.
Well, speaking of the fan base, how much orange is going to dot the shoe with the whole ticket gate situation that's going on?
It's going to be, I think, certainly more than we're accustomed to seeing at Ohio Stadium. There have been very few instances over the years where it's felt like an opposing fan base came in and really took a large swath of seats in the horseshoe. It feels like we're going to have that in some sort of fashion on Saturday night. Hard to really get much of a feeling on the amount of orange we'll see, but I'm guessing it won't be too hard to hide. That is, I think, an interesting. It's not a far drive from Knoxville, and Tennessee obviously has a large fan base, so they can certainly hit the road.
Yeah, no, as we talked about with our buddy Jason Fitz yesterday, the whole state really painted orange. So not a far trip at all to make for that. But you mentioned the angst among the fan base here. How real is the heat around Ryan Day's seat at this point? We hear wild and varying opinions about would a playoff run be necessary to save Ryan Day his job. So do you think that's the case? Do you think it's got to be not just one, but multiple playoff wins for Ryan Day to avoid the gallows in any way here?
At the administrative level, they've said all the right things about Ryan Day. The athletic director, Ross Bjork, was on the radio last week in Columbus and said pretty emphatically that Ryan Day would be the coach next year and that he expected him to be on the sideline next year when they were opening the season against Texas. He said absolutely. So it would surprise me if he was that certain about it, and then they lose to Tennessee, and then they decide to let him go just because of the public posture he took. Doesn't really, I mean, athletic directors give votes of confidence for coaches all the time, but the certainty in which you discuss Day's status is surprising. The other side of the coin is now in this era of college football, you do need your fan base to be behind your coach to a certain degree, because in January, February, March, the head coach, in this case being Ryan Day, needs to go talk to boosters to raise money for NIL, for player retention, for adding guys through the portal. So it's hard if there's too much of a fracture there. So I think it's important not only maybe for Ryan Day to win games to ensure that he's the coach going forward, but also to ensure that he's the coach effectively for Ohio State going forward, where they can bring in money for the collective coffers and all that to keep your roster together, because that was a big part of the reason why they were a national championship contender. They were able to raise NIL money to build a roster that had over $20 million in NIL. So that, I think, is important as anything, because they are going to lose a lot of their upperclassmen from this season. It's going to have a lot of roster turnover. So they need to be effective going into 2025 as well.
Yeah, the dreaded vote of confidence. Yeah, can be a good thing, but can be a bad thing. We've seen it go the other way. So it's all about, obviously, Ohio State making a run, and it starts with Tennessee coming to town. What, in your mind, is the biggest key for Ohio State to win this game?
Handling Tennessee's defensive line, which looks like their strengths with the edge rushers they have and guys like James Pierce. Ohio State's offensive line is its weakest part of the roster. They've had injuries this season with the left tackle Josh Simmons going down at Oregon. Seth McLaughlin, the Alabama transfer who ended up winning the Remington Award, it was an All-American, tore his Achilles second to last week of the regular season, missed the last 2 games. He was really the anchor of the offensive line, and without him, the interior struggled against Michigan to really be able to move the ball. 9 of the 22 carries between Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins went for no yards or a loss of yards. So they just really could not get much of a push at the line of scrimmage. And that's, I think, the biggest concern for Ohio State going into this matchup. Can they sustain enough of a run game? Can they protect Will Howard? Because there's a lot to like about this matchup for the Buckeyes, especially their defense against a redshirt freshman quarterback. But if we're talking about this game on Sunday, Monday, you wonder the offensive line for Ohio State could just be a fatal flaw for them.
You mentioned Will Howard. What's the analysis been of Will's season in Columbus? We know a lot got made of Kyle McCord and the way that departure happened last year. Now Ohio State fans had to go and watch for him throw for 1 billion yards at Syracuse and lead them to 9 wins in Fran Brown's first season in a way that can't have felt great. So as Ohio State fans watch that, how did they feel about the performance of Will Howard coming over here under that pressure?
I think after the Indiana game, Ohio State fans felt really good about Will Howard, and in a lot of ways, he looked like an upgrade over Kyle McCord in terms of the decision making. He was leading the country in completion percentage, could add a run threat. It was a reason why they were able to win at Penn State and milk clock in their final drive, being able to use him as a runner. But the Michigan game, I think, really set people's confidence back in him. Just the decision making that he had with an interception in the red zone, another pick. They were backed up toward their own end zone. So some really just costly, back-breaking interceptions in those games, which makes you wonder about him going into the playoff. For the most part, he's played well in their top 5 games. I know people remember the final slide that he had against Oregon as time was expiring, but played well in that game, played well at Penn State after the first turnover. He's been resilient, but even if you think he's been an upgrade over Kyle McCord, and I think maybe on the whole he has been, it has not returned Ohio State to the class of quarterbacks that they had with C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields. He is not quite in that tier of quarterback that Ryan Day had earlier in his tenure.
So I hate to put you on the spot here, but I'm going to anyway. Ohio State over a touchdown favorite. I know we talked about Ryan Day and his job, but let's get down to if a scenario happens. If Tennessee comes to Ohio State and beats Ohio State, is Ryan Day the head coach next year?
That would be my bet still. I think all bets are off, but if that's the feeling, I think, is just it's ultimately going to be made by the administration level, Ross Bjork and the president Ted Carter. And if those guys want to bring Ryan Day back, I think they will. He's 66-10. He's had very little off-field issues. They've had a good. Their APR score was tied with Harvard. They've talked about some of those things, and that's obviously a hard sell for your fan base. But I think that's largely people compare him a lot to John Cooper and the losses that he had to Michigan in the 90s. But a big reason why Cooper stopped being the Ohio State coach was was not the 10-2 seasons where he lost to Michigan or 11-1 season where he lost to Michigan. He went 6-6 and 8-4 at the end of his tenure. I think that's something to keep in mind. This would be an Ohio State team that was ultimately 10-3, and I think for a team that's still knocking at the door would be hard from the administrative level to just totally pull the plug on.
Completely agree here. Check him out at Joey R. Kaufman on Twitter. Read him at the Columbus Dispatch. Joey, thanks for all the help. Enjoy the weekend here. It should be a fun one.
You too, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Dan, and I agree. Ultimately, I don't think Ryan Day will be fired, barring if Tennessee won by 30 and Ohio State got completely outclassed, then maybe there would be enough riots in the streets for that to happen. But I do think ultimately he's going to get another opportunity. But what Joey mentioned is very real about the effect of this on the donor class. Ohio State is the case study that we've talked about early in the CFP of we knew the dollar amount on this roster out in public. Ross Bajork talked about it. Everybody openly said, yeah, we spent $20 million on this roster before 20 million was the sexy number in college football. If you don't get the return that people were looking for, is that group going to pull back? Is that going to look different going forward? Is something we don't know the answer to yet.
Well, and we just talked about it yesterday. Greg Byrne, the AD at Alabama, letter to the fans, basically saying, hey, we need to keep up with the Joneses, give us money, and so, but fans and alumni look at a team and say, is this worth giving money to? Now, Alabama normally is up there, though they dipped this year. Ohio State normally there as well. So I find it hard to believe that the alumni and the money people would stop giving money to the program if Ryan Day was a coach, because you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, you would effectively be bringing in a coach just to beat Michigan.
Yes.
And I guess win the big games. They lost to Oregon by a point.
Sure.
It was by a point, by the way.
Well, but trust me, that's not the one they give a damn.
Oh, I know. But how ridiculous does it sound to bring in a coach for one game?
Well, the thing is Ohio State thinks anybody can win at that job because largely anyone has. It's sort of like what we've seen at LSU and other places where it seems to be coach agnostic, that the level of talent available to you around there and the resources around the program are going to get it done. But it'll be interesting to see whether or not that's still true. I still think the reality is going to be a bit more sobering. And by the way, I think they're going to win this game. Like, that's the other thing in looking at this. For everything we've talked about here with Will Howard and the offensive line, I still think actually that group put enough good reps on tape. Look at the Indiana game where you had Donovan Jackson out at left tackle, I think already for a couple of games at that point there. And at least on that side, I know, hey, they've had time under task now with that group. It's one thing when you've got an injury in the middle of the game, and Georgia knows this from this season, and you got to shuffle that group mid-game. Now this group's had time to work together. Now they've had plenty of time. They even had the bye week because they weren't playing in the conference championship to continue to get reps together, to get healthy as they can with that group. I think they're going to be ready enough against the Tennessee group that down the stretch of the season started getting home more, but didn't quite get as much bite as like the Ole Miss defense, who got home, got a lot of sacks with that group, and I think is more dynamic overall up front. It's the Tennessee offense that, hey, it's the Dylan Sampson show. I don't trust Nico Iamaleava to go out there and win you a game, even matched up against Will Howard, who may not have the ceiling that we thought, but I still think higher floor overall and played a lot more seasoned. I
agree in the thought of a Josh Heupel offense and a high-scoring, high-flying offense. Nico, 19 touchdowns, but he has only turned the ball over 5 times. Just 5 interceptions, which is key to not give the opponent any extra possessions. But this is playoff football in cold weather. Tennessee kind of fits the bill. Great rushing attack, excellent defense, right?
Yeah.
So again, it doesn't look like it's going to be bad weather, but it's going to be cold, going to be frigid, and that's when a good running game and great defense can take over. The problem is if Ohio State hits a couple and gets Tennessee behind, and Tennessee has to throw to get back into the game, more out of their game plan, taking Sampson out of the game plan, that's going to be trouble.
The last 3 games, Nico Iamaleava has only attempted 4 passes over 20 yards, and he is 0 for 4 on those. Dante Thornton, Brew McCoy, Squirrel White were all banged up at the end of the season. We'll see what they look like in this game. But Nico also in 5 of the 6 games against teams, and shout out to Bill Connolly on this one, 5 of their 6 games against teams in the top 40 on defense and SP+, he's taken 3 sacks in 5 of those 6 6 games. So taking a lot of sacks going up against an Ohio State defensive line that we know can get after the quarterback as well as anybody in the country. And so I think for that reason, I think the offensive line is going to be able to do enough. Now, Tennessee will throw a bunch of stuff at you, but I think that group's been together enough now to go do it. The Ohio State wide receiver core needs no introduction.
No,
They've got great still talent all over the place. And I think this is a game where Will Howard plays point guard better than Nico Iamaleava does. And I think that's what gets it done.
I just think of how Michigan stuffed the hell out of Ohio State with an excellent defense, and Tennessee has an excellent defense. So that it's going to make it real interesting as, oh, by the way, the winner of this team gets the #1 team in the country in Oregon.
Yeah, which would be a rematch for Ohio State, like we talked about, albeit with some different parts in there. What you don't want if you're an Ohio State fan is for this game to be close late, because in close games this season, in the second half when it's a one-score game, Will Howard is 17 of 31 for 174 yards, 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. So it can get a little bit tight late for the Buckeyes if things are closer than they need to be. I think this is a game where you do have to come out firing early. I think we saw that on Conference Championship weekend. The teams that come out and really start to throw haymakers early and try and establish themselves had a much better time than their counterparts. And I think this time of year, if you're a team that's not used to this or a player that's not used to this in Nico, maybe that starts to overwhelm a little bit here. Will Howard was a part of some big moments at Kansas State a few seasons ago, certainly been a part of some big games already at Ohio State.
I think bottom line, it's tough to put it on the shoulders of Nico in this game. I think they have to go with what got him there. That's the run game and tough defense.
Yep. So we will see how that works out for the Buckeyes and Vols this weekend. You and I both picking Ohio State though in this game here. All right. And certainly we talked about it with Joey, all of the angst going on in Columbus surrounding their coach, only going to get ramped up if all of a sudden you have a slow start in that game. Coming up next, we'll look ahead at the rest of the weekend in college football, give you our full CFP preview and picks here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Let's go check in on the NBA right now. So last night was the return of Cat to Minnesota, now known as the Big Bodega. Cat returned with something to prove, notching 32 points, 20 rebounds, and 5 made threes as the Knicks blew out the Wolves 133-107. Elsewhere, LeBron James becomes the leader in minutes played. LeBron has 57,471 minutes played and counting, passing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who sits at number 2, with 57,446 minutes played. That's a lot of minutes. The Warriors lost by 51 to the Grizzlies. Steph Curry failed to make a single jump shot. Wemby reported 42 against the Hawks. Next up, the Fightin' Irish. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. The college football playoffs are here, and that means our guys, the Fighting Irish, Notre Dame's #1 and #2 fanboys, are here to talk about the game against Indiana. You guys are gonna be there. It's an in-state rivalry, kind of. I mean, not really, but maybe. We're just, you know what? This is like, we got to drum up some, intrigue here. In-state rivalry. There could be snow. Like, what else is happening? How are you guys feeling? Are you going to cry? Are you going to throw up? What's going on?
Well, Jesse, I want to ask you those questions because while we're getting ready for the cold in here, you're currently in a studio that's melting like the surface of the sun right now. Are you okay, buddy? Are you going to die in there?
Yeah, I'm not feeling great. I'm having like maybe waking hallucinations right now, but it's okay. It's gonna be fine. I would like to talk to whoever's running this building, though. I have some words with them, but yeah.
You'd like to have a meeting with the higher ups?
Yeah, I would.
Jesse's watching two garden gnomes try and preview the college football playoff right now in her brain as it slowly melts from the inside out.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this is going to be an experience for me, actually in person with you watching a Notre Dame game. You, I guess, like most fanatic Notre Dame fans, wear Notre Dame's wins or losses on your sleeve. I mean, how many times we've texted Mike when he was out calling another college game, and if he would be in the hotel room, how many
it was
remote,
I broke one remote control. It was 2016 at the start of the season when Notre Dame played Texas and lost in double overtime, and that was justified. Now that's different than 2 years ago when I was on the road, and this was the real reminder to me of how not an adult I am about this team. I was calling an NC State Florida State game for Learfield on the radio, and so we were at that game as the weekend Notre Dame played BYU in Las Vegas, and Notre Dame was winning that game at the beginning. It was at the same time as my game, so I didn't get to watch, which was great. Less stress for me. Love it. I went down at halftime to go eat pot stickers in the press box at NC State. Lovely press box, by the way. They're awesome. The SID there is great. Had a great time. Love NC State, just not the national radio booth up there. It's like a little shed on the roof. But either way, I'm down there and the Notre Dame game's on the wall in the press box. So it is me and all the credential media in there. And you know this, the press box, it's not super loud. It's a pretty subdued area there. And we're watching it. Notre Dame's up in this game. They're going to win. They end up winning. But I walk down there and I'm eating my pot stickers and they throw an interception against BYU that all of a sudden gets them back in scoring distance. And my body didn't even have a minute to catch itself. It just knee-jerk slammed the table in front of me, yelled the F word a little louder than I should have, and drew a lot of the eyes of my peers around me. I looked at the rest of my crew and said, I'm going to go and take the rest of my dinner upstairs right now and wait this out where people can't see me. So, yeah, I'm a bit of a problem, but I grew up a Notre Dame fan. Like, it's the difference is you grew up in Ohio and Notre Dame was not your team until Uncle Bob went there, right?
Right. But so did your brother Jake, who played football at Notre Dame. So did your sister Sydney, who swam at Notre Dame. And they're not nutcases.
Yeah, they're like mentally healthier people. Yes. Is that what you want me to say? Because it's the truth. I'm not well. Yeah. That's why I always tell people, like, yes, I thought going through the process of being a Notre Dame football player and having the chance to impact games would mean that I stopped doing things like I did where I was a kid, where I would be in the bathroom and they'd score and I'd stay in the bathroom because I felt like I was doing my part here. And now I'm still doing dumb stuff like that because I'm like y'all. I always try and tell you I'm a little more of a day walker than you when it comes to the blend of former player and fan, because I live this with this team in a way that is corrosive to my physical and mental health.
Well, Jake's coming in for the game too. You can sit next. I'll definitely put him as a buffer in between me and you, because what if it doesn't go well, what a killjoy you're going to be.
All right, you know what? And so that's the walk into my mindset, like the mindset of a lot of people here, because I can stomach losing. This is I'm going to do the total dichotomy of this. Speaking of a great word that Jesse used before, I'm going to use this dichotomy. I'm going to give you the fan reaction right now. Okay. Notre Dame cannot lose this game to this team. I can stomach losing, and the Notre Dame fan base to some point is used to losing to teams like Georgia, Ohio State, the top upper echelon of the sport here. You cannot lose to a team at a school that really only just got good at football. Like, you had the Michael Penix 9-win Indiana teams during and around the pandemic, but this is really the renaissance for Indiana football. To Jesse's point, this has not been a rivalry ever because Indiana's not really been a football school ever in this way. And so these teams don't play. I think they've only played, once before?
Yeah.
And so
this
is not a game that happens often. There's not a lot of rivalry feelings outside of we see each other around the state a lot. And for someone that lost to UConn when I was in school and we lived in Connecticut, that wasn't a fun time to go back home. And for a lot of people around here, it's that same tone and tenor. So that's the fan reaction. Now let's get to analyst view of this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Curt Cignetti is going to have a tough time selling to his team that, hey, we're not just happy to be here. That's not Curt Cignetti's MO.
No.
Now, while the fan base may think that, say, hey, we're playing with get gravy.
They're hashtag undaunted.
Yeah, I mean, if we win, great, phenomenal. If we lose, hey, we got there. The program's turned around. We have the future to look forward to. But yeah, Curt will not have a problem selling his team on this. And this is a game, Mike, where both these teams are not used to trailing. So Indiana has trailed 3 times all year, only once in the second half, and that was to Ohio State, which they eventually lost by double digits to. Notre Dame, since the NIU loss, has had only one one-score game, and that was Louisville. Now USC was a higher scoring game, but Notre Dame never trailed in that game. So that's going to be the interesting thing to me, is if Notre Dame is trailing enough to where they have to throw themselves back into the ball game, because Riley Leonard and the passing game has come a long way, but they haven't needed it.
No,
they haven't been down 7, down 10, down double digits and had to come back, right? They've been able to rely on Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, and obviously Riley Leonard running the ball. But this is a really tough Indiana defense, especially against the run. That's the matchup, right? Notre Dame O-line and running backs against this run defense of Indiana.
Yeah, Indiana's D-line gets talked about a lot, and deservedly so. The D-line for Indiana is dudes, capital D dudes. Yeah. And Mikal Kamara gets a lot of the billing. He was one of the top sackers in the Big Ten playing DN. CJ West at nose tackle, to me, is the guy I want to watch in this game because Notre Dame's ability in the interior offensive line to move him off the spot for a group that's going to move around a lot, I think is going to be one of the biggest factors in the game. But quite honestly, I think Riley Leonard's legs are the other biggest factor. I don't think Indiana has seen a player like him at quarterback in the big games that they played. Michigan had a little bit of that because they were putting Orgy into the game at certain points down near the goal line, but not to the level, the speed, and the effectiveness that Riley's been at quarterback that changes the math in the run game. Because Jeremiah Love, we don't know if he's going to be 100% coming off the knee injury against SC. He's going to play. Howard Cross is going to play. Ultimately, Dad, Notre Dame is a touchdown favorite in this game, and I think they win, and I think they cover. Yeah. I think this is a win. The under hits in this game, where Notre Dame's defense really has to show its teeth against a receiving core that's great for Indiana, but I don't think the same athletic threat as a team like USC that gave them trouble at the end of the season. So I do think Notre Dame gets it done. I think Riley Leonard's legs are the difference in the run game here with a good offensive line against that run defense. And I think on the other side, it's a better matchup athletically for Notre Dame's secondary than SC was.
Yeah, Indiana does have the ability, you know, if they have to throw Curtis Rourke, throw himself back into the game, 27 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions. Your leading receivers are averaging 18 and 21 yards a catch. So they can hit it either on short passage yards after the catch or deeper balls.
Cash it or trash it. Let's do this for this game here. We're going to cash this or trash this. Cash it or trash it is presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. And I'll do you guys one better. I've been doing parlays all season long on the college football front. Indiana has the prop bets available here. So if you're in Indiana and want to do a same game parlay for this one and you're on the Notre Dame side, which I'm picking Notre Dame to win and cover, I have Notre Dame covering the 7 points, Riley Leonard over 50 rushing yards, a Jadarian Price anytime touchdown, and the under 51.5 hitting in this game. So plus, I think 1,700 on DraftKings Sportsbook. Go check that out now.
Yeah, I'll take Notre Dame and I'll give the points in this one.
All right, Dad, let's get to the next game here in the playoff. SMU at Penn State is the game that we're going to be at doing pregame tomorrow that you guys can check out. And this one, Dad, a lot of people, SMU was the controversial team coming into the tournament. Them versus Alabama was the story on Sunday, on Selection Day on Sunday. Do you think they've got a shot at going into Happy Valley and knocking off this Penn State team for the Nooner?
Well, again, it'll be cold, but it won't be horrible weather. Brashard Smith, the running back, has 14 rushing touchdowns, over 1,200 yards. What I like about their offense is they have, I think, 6 or 7 receivers with 20 or more receptions, and they average anywhere from 14 to 16 yards a catch. So again, whether it's short ones to long plays or taking it downfield, they don't really have one main receiver. They can spread the ball out. And while you'd love to have that one great A-type player that you can go to, there's something to be said for by committee, you know, of the defense have not being able to just kind of hone in on one receiver when they have an array of receivers to go to.
No,
where Penn State has Tyler Warren, basically, the tight end,
who may even have more on his plate because of the injury to Bo Prabula, which is the other big storyline of this game. Penn State's backup quarterback, as we talked about a lot this weekend, entered the portal, leaving the team, put in a really impossible situation decision-making wise, and waiting to see how that affects it. Dad, we've talked a lot about where we think the best chance for an upset is in the first round, and so many people have pointed to Tennessee and Ohio State. I think it's this SMU team against Penn State. I think that they've got what it takes because Kevin Jennings at quarterback is such a threat with his legs, and it took them way too long, in my opinion, to get to that against Clemson in the ACC championship game. Clemson was the one started off with the trick plays, with running the quarterback in Klubnik, and got SMU on their heels early. SMU went to that after halftime and looked like a different team. Yeah. And so I think if they can come out early and do that, because you've got to throw a lot at Abdul Carter on the other side. This Penn State team has always been a fast, lethal group of athletes. Abdul Carter makes that number 11 sing the way some of the greats there have. But I think that SMU has got what it takes on offense, between an offensive line that's better than I think it gets any credit for nationally, and a quarterback that can affect the game and mitigate some sacks with his legs. I think you've got to, if you're Rhett Lashley in that offense, present a lot to Abdul Carter early, try and move the ball around east and west here. I think they've got a shot to pull this off. I'm still going to end up picking Penn State on this one, but that 9-point spread might be a little bit rich for my team.
That's too much for me too. I think I'd lean Penn State as well. But no way would I be giving 9. Not when this offense is so reliant on one guy in Tyler Warren. The next 4 receivers for Penn State have 89 catches, and Tyler Warren has 88. So they are so reliant. There's only 2 receivers on this team, or 3 that have over 20 receptions.
Four receivers have combined for basically Tyler Warren's stat line. 89 catches for 1,453 yards. Tyler Warren himself, 88 for 1,062. It's been remarkable. And don't sleep on that SMU defense, by the way. Group of dudes over there, tied for 3rd with 40 sacks this season. They had 47 last year. They're 9th in the country with only 10 rushing touchdowns allowed. Depth will be the interesting part of this because we know the Power 4 versus Power 5 difference. And oh, by the way, SMU making the jump to the Power 4 in their first year, making it to the playoff. They're one of 4 teams in a new conference that made the playoff this year to join Oregon, Texas, and then Arizona State. So interesting stuff there. I think they're going to show really well. I think this is going to be a really exciting game between these 2 teams here. Let's finish off with one that Jason Fitz yesterday came on and said he thinks is going to be a blowout. Clemson at Texas in a battle for which color orange we like better. Who do you got, Dad?
I mean, I think I have to go with Texas in this game. But man, I counted Clemson. It's a 12-point spread. I counted Clemson out at the beginning of the year. I didn't think they'd make the ACC title game, let alone win it. But Cade Klubnik, what he's done offensively has been stunning. You knew they were going to have an excellent defense, which they do. And how much do we saw Quinn Ewers, got that kind of mid-second round grade as a quarterback. He's going to think about coming back next year, which is going to produce an interesting conundrum with he and Arch Manning. I don't think it'll be a conundrum. One will stay, one will go. But I think Texas is still overall too strong for Clemson.
Yeah, I think for Texas, it's going to be about Steve Sarkisian, the play caller. I think at the end of the Georgia game, got a little too far in his bag. Tried to do a little bit too much and overcomplicate things because answers weren't popping up for them in the downfield passing game, and they needed to do something. That's got a better chance of working against this Clemson defense that's a little more boom or bust. Still a good havoc rate team, could still create problems around the line of scrimmage, but I think Sark is one of the best screen play callers and play action play callers in college football, can help them out. And on the other side, I just don't think Clemson offensively has seen a defense like this. Again, it's credit to Bill Connolly over at ESPN. Cade Klubnik against the top defenses that they've faced this season. So the 5 best defenses that they've faced. 59% completion percentage, 9.8 yards per completion, 12 sacks taken during that time. And this Texas defense is number 2 in SP plus on D. They are by far the best unit that Clemson has faced on defense this year. I just think that's too much. I don't think this Clemson passing attack has much of a chance versus the Texas secondary. And so while what Clemson has done has been a great story for this year, I think it ends against the Longhorn team that against everyone not named Georgia has looked really good this season.
Are you giving the 12? That's a lot. That's the biggest spread, obviously, of the 4 games.
I think I am. I like this Texas team.
I think so as well. I think it'll be one of those that will roll up on Clemson, and as they try and get back into the game, they may fall further and further behind.
Kelvin Banks, especially expected to be back at left tackle for Texas, a huge boost for that team. One of the best players in the country at that position. Coming up next, who the hell do the Chicago Cubs think they are? Next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. The fellas are getting ready to watch the Notre Dame game in the snow. I'm in the studio here in Boston where I don't even know how hot it is in here, but let's just say it's very hot. Also, the thermostat, oh yeah, well you can't see it, but the thermostat says one thing and then I'll let you know I'm sitting underneath the lights, so it's very hot here. And that's all I have to say about that, but if I go off on some random tangents or if I just stop talking, it's because I passed out. Anyway, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Where are we? Where am I? I don't know. Sammy Sosa and the Chicago Cubs have reconciled. Yeah, you thought that came out of left field. Baseball, baby. All right, so they reconciled Thursday afternoon. It was a 17-year estrangement here, okay, because Sammy Sosa, he's part of the PED era. There's been a lot of, issues with him, and basically the Cubs in 17 years have not invited him to anything, okay? So he released this statement apologizing for mistakes during his playing career. He didn't admit to, using steroids or anything, but he did say he was sorry, mistakes were made, and then the Cubs came out and said, we appreciate the apology, and then immediately invited him to an event, which the audacity, fellas, of the Cubs to be like, yeah, you better apologize? ? I find this all a little bit weird.
To bully a man they benefited off during one of the most exciting eras of baseball into some half-hearted, half-assed apology as the access or the ticket back into Cubs events here is laughably stupid in my mind here. I saw our buddy Buster Only tweeting about this, and he used the perfect word. It's the sanctimony. It's just the self-righteousness of baseball that pisses me off to no ends at time. And for the Cubs here to sit here and make him trot this out like that, where again, to Jesse's point, he doesn't admit to doing anything. He says, there were times I did whatever I could to recover from injuries in an effort to keep my strength up, to perform over 162 games. I never broke any laws, but in hindsight, I made mistakes and I apologize. So that was good enough for you, Chicago, to now invite him back in after the big bad thing that you definitely didn't promote, didn't profit from, didn't enjoy tremendously when it was going on here like the rest of us. Give me a break.
Oh, I mean, it was a horrible apology. And then for the Cubs to immediately invite him back to things is just so pompous.
Oh yeah, now we're good.
Yeah, now we're fine that you gave that half-assed apology that we've waited 17 years for. And for those that are wondering again, well, this for the younger crowd of what the hell went on, there was testing in baseball. There was anonymous testing. I think it was back in 03 and 02 or 03, and based off of the amount of people that tested positive, they would go into a policy, a drug policy, and enough players tested positive for that. But they wouldn't, in 2003, baseball did not have penalties for first-time positive test offenders. So Sosa was never, didn't get nailed then for it, and is denied, so much so that in 05 in Congress, he, Rafael Palmeiro, Jose Canseco, Mark McGuire sat in front of Congress and all denied everything. Sick. Sammy Sosa said,
what a time.
To be clear, I have never taken illegal performance-enhancing drugs. I have never injected myself or had anyone inject me with anything. I have not broken the laws of the United States or the laws of the Dominican Republic. I have been tested as recently as 2004. I am clean. And now he says he made mistakes. So it's just an embarrassing situation.
It was, again, and you know what? For younger people that weren't around, it was the coolest era of baseball in my life. And I understand we shouldn't glorify steroids and all that stuff, but it is impossible to ignore an entire era that Major League Baseball likes to act like didn't happen, where some of their most popular cultural relevance overall occurred, was in the midst of an era that they're going to try and wipe from the halls of fame and make sure none of these guys ever see it. But you cannot wipe from my memory, Major League Baseball, how freaking cool all this was. And the home race between Barry Bonds or Sammy Sosa and Mark McGuire, and then eventually Barry Bonds doing what he did, were some of my fondest sports memories. And I'm not even a huge baseball fan, never have been, but this was so uniquely captivating at this time that to spit in the face of all of our intelligence and act like it didn't happen, or it's something you're so deeply ashamed of here, is ridiculous.
Yeah, and he didn't get in the Hall of Fame. McGuire didn't, Clemens didn't, Bonds didn't, because of the implications of steroid use. And I've been on record as saying, if the play on the field was good enough, put him in. You can put a plaque up that says it was a steroid error, whatever you want.
Because you know what? They probably weren't the ones doing
my God.
These burly lads just did the steroids in the baseball better than everyone else at the time.
Listen, and this is from personal experience because I've admitted steroid use when I came off an injury.
Hell yeah.
Average players use steroids more than stars.
Yes.
Because average players are trying to A, get to the league, or B, stay in the league. Stars are doing it to stay up on top and to have great stats, which of course all these guys did. But again, Bonds, we don't have to rehash the whole thing. Bonds had Hall of Fame stats before he was accused and thought of doing steroids the way his body grew. So, I mean, give me a break. But it's and for those that say, oh, if I knew what was going on, I wouldn't have watched the Sosa McGuire home run race. BS.
People say that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. When I was doing the show with Greeny and we would talk about this, the steroid era, people were like, oh, if I knew about it, I wouldn't have been as into it. You're so full of it. I mean, that was exciting to watch. That was phenomenal to watch.
I mean, God, and you know what? God forbid that came from anyone who's overlapped as an NFL fan in their lifetime for a league that every time steroids come up, we just sort of suspend someone for 4 games and then look the other when we come back and then don't mind the man behind the curtain. Like, come on.
And I'm not glorifying steroids. I'm saying they were part of sport.
Right.
Acknowledge it. It was part of the NFL. It was part of baseball. It was part of all sports. And, you know, and when you're getting caught and tested positive as much as you are, acknowledge it and move on. But I just been amazed with how people get all sanctimonious about it.
Maybe Sammy Sosa wants and needs it. Like maybe it'll make him feel better to be a part of all this. But man, if I was him, there'd be part of me that was thinking of telling the Cubs to kick rocks.
To stick it, yeah.
Like, I mean, at this point, again, to basically subtly force the man into this apology before you let him back, to me is just ridiculous.
And then for Sosa and his people, what's the best apology we can make without actually apologizing for anything?
Tiptoe up to the line?
Tiptoe up to the line. Don't cross to the line. I made mistakes, i.e. steroids. I mean, it's just word vomit. Right?
Yes.
It's word vomit on both sides.
Yes, certainly word vomit on both sides there. So a little baseball audacity on a Friday heading into the winter break here for everybody. Jesse, let's get to more current news about a player trying to recover from injury in the college football playoff. Not looking like great news for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to have to go through the college football playoffs without starting quarterback Carson Beck. He had that UCL injury. It looks like he's going to have surgery. Obviously, Georgia has the first round bye, but they do not think that he's going to be able to return this season, even if they come through with the W in that game. So, guys, what do we do? Gunnar Stockton, you're up.
Yeah, Dad, Gunnar Stockton, who played the second half of the SEC championship game that, oh, by the way, Georgia won against Texas. And really in that game, Dad, remember, Carson Beck got injured on the last play of the first half. They were attempting a long throw, and he gets hit at an awkward angle, and that's what triggers all of this. But the Georgia offense had not looked well in the first half of that game and really came to life when Gunnar Stockton came in the second half. Now, albeit so much, it was a low-scoring game overall, but there was a little life there. He's going to have plenty of time to prepare now as Georgia is one of the teams with the first-round bye. But, Dad, Carson Beck was expected to be one of the strengths of this team coming into the season. He's a veteran who played in a bunch of big games for them all the way through last year. And now you're throwing a guy with comparatively much less experience into a situation where whoever the winner of this Notre Dame-Indiana game is going to face. So how big of an effect is this in your mind on the entire playoff picture as a whole?
Well, I mean, Georgia had not been running the ball that well, have they? I mean, so it had not been great. So they rely on Beck and passing. And Stockton went in the second half, was 12 of 18, 71 yards, threw an interception. So what the biggest difference is you could put the game on Carson Beck's shoulders. You think long and hard about it, the game's on Stockton's shoulders, right?
Right. Could you do what Georgia did in the second half against Alabama, where, hey, they ended up losing that game, but Carson Beck and that offense throw them back into that thing.
Exactly right. So depending on who they play, it's either Indiana or Notre Dame. Is their opponent, you know, how much can is the quarterback just a complementary piece, or, you know, how Carson Beck was one of the main pieces, Stockton is going to be one of a complementary of pieces.
Now, again, we know still the war machine around the quarterback at Georgia, still up and running. The offensive line situation got a lot better as the season went along. Tate Ratledge, their best player, came back, had that tightrope procedure that we've seen a bunch of Bama and Georgia players have over the years, comes back at the end of the year. And when he was in there and guys weren't going down in the middle of games, they were able to stabilize that group a little more. They were able to protect the quarterback a little better. They were able to open up a little bit better rushing attack. And so I'd imagine that group is going to benefit from the break as much as anybody in the sport, Dad, of getting the opportunity to go ahead and do that. But I still look at this and go, all right, the Georgia skill on offense doesn't really have a star in the midst in the wide receiver core. The running back room, Trevor Etienne, dealt with injury and stuff early in the season. I think the suspension coming off the beginning of the year and then took fire there. But this defense, still one of the most talented, lethal fighting forces for my money. And it'd be right there neck and neck with them in Texas. But the best third down defense in terms of what they can throw at you personnel-wise and structurally in the scheme of that defense. Jalen Walker has been a menace this year. So the bookends there are still going to keep them in any game. But now, especially when you're grading on the curve of teams like Oregon in the national championship picture, this definitely is a huge blow to this team.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you kind of lose your home run hitting ability.
Yeah.
Right. If you need it. And, you know,
at least that we know of here. Gunnar Stockton is still a Georgia football recruit.
Still kind of an unknown of just coming in and playing a half. So now
he was recruited by Georgia, though. So I assume until proven otherwise, he's a good football player.
It's now his offense, right? Game plan's running through. It's his offense. He's going to play instead of just always being one play away and not getting the most reps in practice. Now he is getting all the reps in practice.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I got asked this question the other day by somebody on Blue Sky of, you know, the difference in a game with a left-handed quarterback going in and if it changes anything for the offensive line. And it made me think about these quarterback changes again and what it potentially affects. And I always go back to two things. It's cadence and timing.
Right.
For the offensive line, that's what you're most worried about, is going through this now and how he operates in whatever your version of the huddle is here, how he operates, the cadenisms and the mechanisms at line of scrimmage. And then to me, the timing with receivers and everybody else, because if the menu of plays all of a sudden starts to look different, there were things you do. You had the offense under there that Carson Beck was comfortable running. And to your point, that's going to change now. Does Georgia have enough time under task in general and enough time in the lead up for this game with the bye to go out here and be able to put together a plan that not only Gunnar Stockton's comfortable with, but that all the weapons around him in this offense and that offensive line are comfortable with? He's going to be setting up at a different place in the pocket. He probably moves differently and has a different comfort level. And so that's all stuff that these guys have to learn on the fly in the gap they've had from the SEC title to the quarterfinal.
And they get an extra week to help get from obviously between the O-line and the cadence of the quarterback. And it's better this way than Carson maybe coming back and then not being able to play and Stockton not getting all the number.
That I very much agree. The clarity in this, while it sucks for Carson Beck and the team overall,
great for Stockton.
Huge for, I mean, for the rest of the team to have that, like, we know who our guy. You're not making one game plan for if Carson Beck can go and then having to adjust on the fly. So that's a great point for the Georgia Bulldogs, who are trying to, I'm sure, salvage some bit of solace in this for a team that they still think could be talented enough to win. That being said, Dad, this is probably a good time to reveal that, like some of my peers, I was a little uncomfortable with this at first until I did the exercise. And factoring this in, I've got Notre Dame and Oregon playing in the national championship in my bracket. I'm nervous for how this happened. Now, I have avoided full homerism here. I think Oregon wins the national title as we look forward towards predicting it this season. And I think this has been the most consistent team in college football all year long. I think that Dylan Gabriel, who ended up finishing third in the Heisman voting here, ultimately is been a difference maker at that position. I think that as much as anything shined through in the Big Ten championship. Watching him opposite Drew Aller, who is on the cusp of some all-time numbers as far as being a Penn State quarterback and his production there. Still, it just was not close in terms of what one quarterback was doing operating an offense versus another, in my mind, watching that game. And so I still think they're the favorite. But if Notre Dame can go out there and handle business against Indiana tonight, they've got as good an opportunity as they'll have against a Georgia team probably this decade based on this recent injury and the way the season's gone for them. It's still going to be difficult because that Georgia defense is a war machine. But I can think of a close win there. And then if Penn State comes out of the bracket on the other side, I like that matchup for Notre Dame overall. And so, yeah, I could see them on the other side. I had, Texas winning against Clemson and ASU and making it to match up with Oregon, who beats Ohio State in the rematch there too. So a lot of chalk in the bracket, but that's kind of what we've seen historically.
I actually have Notre Dame playing Oregon in the title game as well. And begrudgingly leaning toward Oregon in that game. Because I agree. I think Notre Dame can get by Indiana. I think they can get by Georgia with how great the defense has been playing. And a passing attack obviously has hurt Notre Dame, but I don't think a passing attack of Georgia and Stockton would. So I go Notre Dame, Oregon national title.
We're certainly not trying to curry favor for our next guest. Coming up, Oregon head coach Dan Lanning stops by to talk to us about their playoff path next. right, welcome back to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. Me and Dad out here getting ready to take in the first college football playoff home game as Notre Dame is set to host Indiana. But we're excited to be joined right now by a guy that actually gets to, I'm sure, kick his feet up and relax totally this weekend.
Nothing.
Oregon head coach Dan Lanning, kind enough to take some time with us this morning. Good morning, Coach. How you doing?
Morning. Thanks for having me.
No, we appreciate you being here. And, jokes aside, we know it's surely business, but what is it like for you guys? How are you treating this bye weekend as everyone else in the sport gets ready to play these first round home games here? What's it been like for you guys out there in Oregon getting ready for this?
Yeah, we've kind of treated it like I've talked to a couple of NFL teams. You kind of treat it the same of if you have a first round bye, you kind of prepare for both teams. You have a plan for both teams, spend a couple practice days on one team, a couple on the other, and then within all that chaos, managing, having guys maybe travel in from a portal and evaluate your roster, try to get a jump on some of those things as well.
It's this round and having the bye. It's kind of like the NCAA basketball tournament where the team is waiting for one of two opponents and they scout them both. Do you split the staff to scout them both, or does the staff scout each team individually? How do you work it?
Yeah, we focused really on both teams. We've devoted a couple days to both teams, broken it down completely. That way you're kind of prepared for both. And then once we know who we're playing, we'll dial it in even a little bit more.
So you guys are dialing in that way here, but how have you approached this with the players? This is sort of a new uncharted territory in the expanded playoff in general for everybody. And so we know coaches, players, all creatures of habit. How have you approached it with those guys and trying to normalize this week?
Yeah, I think part of it's what you just said, creatures of habit. So trying to keep their routine, very similar. The one thing that we've probably incorporated a little bit more is our recovery days. During a normal season, you're going to have 4, sometimes 5 days in a row of practice. Right now, we're going 3 days on with a day in between for recovery and lift. So adjusted that schedule slightly, but trying to keep a lot of their routine the same.
How different, I was going to say, how was your experience your first year in the Big Ten? Well, you won it, you're undefeated, so it went pretty well. But how much did it differ from the Pac-12?
There weren't a ton of differences. Good football is good football, right? In either league, you got to be able to play a certain brand of football to be able to win. You got to be able to do well in the trenches. I'd say it is a physical league. I'd just say the history of the league was the part that was maybe as exciting to be a part of, getting to play in some epic venues and be around some great people. But the travel obviously is a difference that a lot of people want to point to. We traveled a decent amount already for games because of where we're at. So that wasn't a huge change.
Certainly, you guys are used to playing against premier competition. We know the last few seasons that you've been in Oregon, lots of high-profile games for you guys. And getting your team ready for big games, Coach, is something you've done extraordinarily well. I know you guys don't play for clicks, but you've done a great job in showing people inside your program the process of creating a goal and a mantra for every week here. So what is that like for you guys? How do you go through that process of trying to figure out unique ways to motivate your team each week?
Yeah, I think ultimately as coaches, I think motivation's a little overrated, but you're trying to find unique ways to say the same things over and over again, to hammer home the details that you think matter when it comes to winning games. And we go through a lot of that in the summer, just spend some time talking about the next few weeks, what those will look like for us, but we try to kind of plan it out in advance and then see if it still fits when we get there. Hey, here's kind of our thought for this game. Will that still carry over, when we actually get to that moment? And if not, we kind of pivot and may change the message a little bit or even change it within the week. Hey, this is something that really fits what we're trying to hammer home. And our players have done an unbelievable job of buying into that.
So while it's the first year of the college playoffs, it's been a couple of years where in between end of the season and bowl games, coaches, you guys have to deal with the portal. And we see SMU and Penn State, both backup quarterbacks going in the portal, one staying with the team, one not staying with the team. How have you dealt with the portal, both with players that potentially want to leave and guys that you have to look at to come in?
Yeah, it's a tough management issue, but I always say if we feel like we can do it better than anybody else, and we can adapt better than anybody else, it can be an advantage for us if we figure out how to manage our time. So ultimately, I'm certainly a proponent of let's put the season to bed, let's finish the season, and then the portal opens, and that gives players and coaches and the teams the best interest at heart. But I don't know that you can do that with the championship game being as late as it is in January. I would love for everything to be bumped up, even if it meant we started playing football sooner. That would give the opportunity for the season to end and then still give players the opportunity to explore their options once the season's over.
Yeah, certainly going to need to be some solutions found for a process that seems up in the air right now. The other process that we've got a lot of talk, Coach, was the seeding process for this. You guys are the 1 seed for the first time in this expanded 12-team field. We know with the conference champions being the top 4 highest ranked getting the bye, it's created an interesting situation where now in the second round, you guys would host the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee in a way that a lot of people look at and say, man, doesn't feel like a reward for the season. What did you think of the seeding process for the team that went out and earned the 1 seed the way you guys did through the regular season?
Yeah, what an opportunity. In the playoffs, you got to beat great teams. We get an opportunity to go play against some great teams. So not really concerned with the process. You know, we look at who we have to prepare for, who we have to get ready for. Ultimately, we get to get ready for some really good teams. So excited about that.
How about individually? Dylan Gabriel is 3rd in the Heisman. He has a heck of a year. It almost seems like you guys were the forgotten number 1 because you were just number 1 for basically the entire season. How would you describe how he has helped this team?
Dylan's had unbelievable poise this entire year. He prepares the right way. He's got his teammates' confidence, you know, in him, and he's had some huge moments where he's made, you know, game-changing plays for us that have been the difference in our season. You know, a 4th and 9 versus Wisconsin, 4th and 2 versus Penn State. He's had some really big plays where he's came up, you know, huge for his team, and he's earned those guys' trust. So really proud of him. And certainly I think we have some players that have been overlooked, but that's okay. We don't mind having a chip on our shoulder. I think they remember those moments.
Yeah, certainly. Well, Coach, you come from a long line of a coaching tree with, you know, Kirby Smart, who obviously goes back to Nick Saban, of finding ways on talented teams to continue to manufacture that chip. But I do wonder for you, too, what it's been like this year. I've seen you get to interact with him on game day a bunch. What it's like seeing Nick Saban now go on TV and be this guy yucking it up with everyone after the version of the guy I'm sure you've known and seen in the sport for all these years.
Well, I think deep down, Nick's laughing at all of us right now because he knows what we're dealing with. And I think he's the guy that has to be around football. So I never thought that he'd be the guy that could be home, you know, twiddling his thumbs. So the fact that he still gets to be involved, still gets to be a voice of the game, I think he's unbelievable for the game of football. But I think he's probably enjoying some aspects that he's not dealing with right now.
So as this weekend starts tonight with Notre Dame and Indiana and then 3 games tomorrow, will you be working or will you take time and actually watch these games? Or do you watch enough film in your life where you don't need to?
We'll definitely try our best to be able to pay attention in the middle of recruiting and some other things that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, like you say, got to find time in the litany of things that a college head coach has going on right now. But no one and no program have handled it better thus far than the Oregon Ducks. Again, undefeated Big Ten Conference champions, and now the 1 seed in the expanded 12-team playoff as we get set to go this weekend here. Coach, last one, about a minute left here. Are you guys disappointed you're not going to get a home game out of this whole deal here? I know you get the bye. I know you said the process is what the process is, but how much would it mean to get to host a playoff game out there in Eugene?
Yeah, you know, that's another thing that I would say in the future is worth exploring. You know, the NFL's been doing playoff games for a long time, so has FCS football. And that's a model that makes sense. But I think right now in college football, we're trying to make a lot of people happy, you know, and part of that's the bowl process. But yeah, I think it certainly makes sense to have playoff games at home until you get into that championship game.
Yeah, I got to appease those bowl games,
yes,
don't you?
Exactly. I'm going to say, Coach knows the game around here in the system all too well. But certainly the game on the field for Oregon been awesome this year. Coach, been a ton of fun to watch. Congratulations on all the success and best of luck going forward into the postseason here. We're excited to watch you guys and the rest of this field go at it.
Appreciate it. You guys have a great one.
Thanks, Coach.
You too, Coach. Oregon head coach Dan Lanning, kind enough to give us some time and a weekend where he does get to sit back and be a little bit more of a viewer. But, Dad, they're the team that you and I both picked to win the national championship this year and would be a first and a big moment and kind of the crown jewel of what Dan and this program have been building to for a while since he came over here and succeeded Mario Cristobal.
Right. Now they're looking for the payoff, right?
Yes.
Right. They now each team has their own story of the 12 in the playoffs on why they would want to win the championship. But certainly Oregon not having gotten one wanting to get that payoff in a modern time.
He has managed to come over and bring that Kirby Smart Georgia-like machine feel to this and that same bit of motivation to a Ducks team that, as he said, really needs none knowing what lays out in front of them in terms of their goals and their hopes heading into this playoff. Our goals and hopes are to get you guys through this, that, and the third and into the weekend next on GoJo and Golic. All right, let's finish off the week the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the weekend. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Watch us live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Subscribe to the GoJo Golic YouTube channel this holiday season. Tell a friend. Give them the gift of all the content over there. All of our interviews up there. All of that stuff you can find right on that tab. And if you missed any of our great interviews today here on the show here, shout out to Dan Lanning, who was just kind enough to join us, the Oregon head football coach, enjoying the bye weekend in the lead up to being the 1 seed in the college football playoff. And Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch joining us to preview Ohio State, Tennessee as one of the other big games of the weekend. If you missed any of that, head on over wherever you get our podcast or right here on the YouTube channel as soon as we get done. Little housekeeping note, next week we'll be off the majority for Christmas. Right. Dad, you'll be on Monday with Jason Fitz and Charlotte Wilder. I will be off all next week. We got a great holiday special.
Yes, we do.
Coming your way here. A bunch of awesome guests here.
Yeah.
Mina Kimes, Katie Nolan, Jason and Charlotte. Plenty of great stuff there that you're going to get to enjoy during the week while we're all recharging during the holidays. So a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays from me to everybody out there. Always appreciate you guys tuning in for this. It means a lot. We're excited to attack it again in the new year.
We will. We will be here Monday, though, sans Mike, though, to cover all the incredible football that is going to be going on, both college and NFL, intermingling on Saturday.
Yes, exactly. We get that little a wintry mix, if you will, on Saturday with college and the NFL. So, yes, Dad, Charlotte, Fitz will all be here Monday to react. So fear not. We got your football overreactions covered on Monday. And we got this, that, and the third covered right now. So let's get started here with the NBA. We announced the NBA Hall of Fame nominees and the first-time nominees, I should say, a list of candidates for the class of 2025 that includes Carmelo Anthony, along with retired NBA stars Dwight Howard, Marc Gasol, and Amari Stoudemire, and WNBA greats. You got a big class this year. Sue Bird, Maya Moore, Sylvia Fowles, among others, that are headlining a class of just superstar talents, Dad, that we know for the Basketball Hall of Fame, it is all-encompassing careers, international, NBA, everything in the mix there. And so a lot of really exciting candidates here.
For what belies that fact is Carmelo Anthony can go in twice.
Yes.
He can go in as an individual, and also a nominee is a 2008 U.S. Olympic men's basketball team, of which Carmelo Anthony was part of. So he can actually be inducted into it twice. And they changed the rules. Now, in the NFL, it's 5 years from when you retire. For the Basketball Hall of Fame, it was 3 years. It's now down to 2 years. So people can be eligible a lot quicker after they retire.
And coaching-wise, Doc Rivers eligible this year, Billy Donovan eligible this year, Miami Heat general manager Mickey Arison, and Gonzaga head coach Mark Few, along with Iowa women's coach Lisa Bluter, who obviously, along with the rise of Caitlin Clark, got a lot of notoriety for the work that she had done in that program here. So a cool class. I mean, listen, as someone that grew up, I'm 35 years old, Carmelo Anthony, Amari Stoudemire, some of these names in here on the men's side certainly invoke a lot of nostalgia. I mean, I wonder if at this point people forget how intertwined Melo and LeBron James were coming out when they did. Melo coming in as this much more complete scorer at the beginning, and what a rivalry that felt like, that was so bonded in respect between those two guys. But the championship season at Syracuse, just everything, Carmelo Anthony, he feels like nostalgic basketball for me so much. And so I'm going to enjoy seeing the highlights, all the looking back at the career that was one of the most important in my life in the NBA.
And also for it is Dwight Howard. I still remember Dwight Howard as an 18-year-old senior in high school.
Crazy.
You know, on the cover of the magazines coming into the league. Oh, wow. And then what his body was always the wide shoulders.
Oh yeah, I mean the dunk contest, the Superman cape, and sticking the sticker up on the backboard. So you got them there. I mean, Maya Moore needs no introduction. Arguably one of the greatest women's basketball players or hoopers. Period. Caitlin Clark's icon. Sue Bird, one of the coolest people I've ever been around. Legitimately, one of the few people I'm still starstruck by when I have seen her out or when we had her on the show back at ESPN. So tons of deserving candidates there. Congratulations to everyone. That seems like a group that's all going to call the hall home at some point here.
Right, exactly.
But the first time nominee is getting some love here now. Jesse, let's move on to that and go from good basketball to bad hoops.
Yeah, so Lane Kiffin decided to show a shot attempt by one of his players. He put it on Twitter, and it is absolutely horrendous. Terrible attempt here. Also, something we were talking about in the break. Was anything on the line here, do we think? Like, it was like, if you make this shot, like, no practice or whatever.
Let's paint a picture for people that are maybe listening on the podcast or watching right now. There's a basketball hoop in the team meeting room, which is not altogether out of place in a locker room or a meeting room. Ping pong tables, basketball hoops, all these secondary activities designed to, quite honestly, make players want to stay in the facility longer by having fun stuff there. That's the only reason they put nice things in the facility.
And fun.
Stay woke. But doing this in front of the team meeting room here, Dad, to Jesse's point, is usually done with some sort of incentive.
Absolutely.
Whether it's having fat guys catch punts at the end of practice or do something like this in the meeting room, usually it's to get time off in practice, get out of conditioning at the end of practice, maybe get free from a meeting here. And so these usually come with stakes. And especially when it's the bigger guy, you feel the pressure of wanting to go out there and put on for the rest of your teammates. And this guy airmailing it over the top of the backboard, you saw the whole crowd rise up, getting ready to celebrate their brother, and then immediately get deflated when they were reminded of his lack of ability to ball.
There's no doubt. And Lane Kiffin was covering him. It wasn't just like it was a shot. Like we've seen just actual shots in locker rooms, both in college and the NFL, where, as you mentioned, something's on the line. And I think the best thing we see is when the lineman is trying to catch the punt.
Yes.
Out at practice to get out of, usually it's conditioning drills. And to see the big man trying to go under the punt can be pretty funny. But you're right. Listen, there's no doubt there was something on the line here. I would just like to know, as all the other athletes stood up to see it go in, who the first ones were to realize not only is it not going in, but it's going completely over the backboard and not even going to get close to the net.
Yeah, you can see a couple of the reactions in here of guys. I mean, there's got to be a freeze frame at some point that tells the story of disappointment in a way that our words never could. And by the way, this would have been me, awful basketball player. And the guy had everything in the lead up to the shot, backed it down a little bit, was able to clear out some space and get a good look on the jumper. And then, like most big guys, lacking the touch to go out there and be able to get off that mid-range shot. So shout out to Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin for keeping it light in there in the midst of a bowl season that we know is different and chaotic. And that's, you know, bowl season is full of a lot of forced fun and moments that are manufactured by coaches because you got to be around campus there. To get a rare moment of joy where you get to roast one of your teammates for being bad at basketball, because I promise you, again, I've said this before, no more valuable currency in a sports locker room, especially a football locker room, than being good at basketball. And if you're not one of the guys that's good at basketball, man, you are going to hear about it.
I was never. Oh, no. I mean, you were a wrestler. I was wrestling. And wrestling and basketball do not mix.
I always tell people I was not one of those fat athletes. I was just fat. And so me going out there and trying to do anything on any of those other athletic realms wasn't going to have a good time. Speaking of not having a good time at the basketball court, Jesse, let's get to the third.
Yeah, so the Celtics suffered one of their bigger losses of the season last night against the Bulls, and Joe Mazzulla went at the refs as the clock expired. This man was being held back, multiple people trying to get him back, get him off the court, stop him from yelling whatever he's yelling. There were some F words allegedly being yelled. And he was asked about the moment, and of course, in true Joe Mazzulla fashion, he had an answer. He said he was just trying to wish the refs a Merry Christmas because he hadn't seen them in a while. So that was his explanation for this intense exchange. As you can see here, he's just freaking out. But apparently he was just telling him Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas from Joe Mazzulla has to be among the more unhinged things that anyone's ever been a part of here. I'm surprised we don't see this more often from Joe Mazzulla, considering what always seems to be bubbling below the surface is a quiet rage, the likes of which mankind's never seen.
Well, and I don't think he went off on he's saying that he just wished him a Merry Christmas, saved him from getting fined, not messing with the refs. Though, who knows when you're swearing at the refs on the court, if that's, gets back to the league and you get fined for that.
I will say this, there is no person I would actually believe just to voice his frustration would do something as weird as loudly screaming Merry Christmas at the refs over and over. No one I would believe that for more than Joe Mazzulla.
Yeah.
I believe pretty much everything, like the NBA Sentinel accounts that get everyone. You could make a living off just faking wild Joe Mazzulla quotes in a way that I would believe every time.
Well, that's the thing. You could have the contest.
Yes.
True or false on a Mazzulla quote.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. ChatGPT could have a field day making fake Joe Mazzulla quotes for a nation to consume and get retweets on an account. As a reminder this holiday season, do yourself the favor of always double checking where that extra ER letter is in a Dern Schurfter or NBA Centel so you don't get yourself caught up.
I don't know what you're saying right now.
Exactly. This is for, just keep
clue what
quote tweets and retweet, buddy. Those are your friend. Quote tweets and retweets for our account here. Downloads, subscriptions, ratings, and reviews for the podcast as well. That all works. Have a great holiday. Flip the parking lot. Go Irish.